She wants to take credit for their victories, but wants to have nothing to do with everything that basically chased Biden out of office outside of his age. We're talking about inflation. We're talking about the Afghanistan withdrawal. We're talking about his perhaps mishandling of the wars in Ukraine and the Israeli-Gaza conflict. So again, it's just too early. Well, I say too early. We only have a few weeks left in the election.
Right.
But to know whether or not this sort of hands-off and give me a hug approach will work for Vice President Harris.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by White House reporter Christian Datoc. Christian, Joe Biden is back. He's really been out front because of some things going on in the news. Talk a little bit about where we've seen him sort of taking charge again in public.
Jim, so there's a number of places we've seen Biden back out in public this week. The first, of course, was the unfortunate anniversary of the October 7th terror attacks, although the president did not publicly speak. He held a ceremony at the White House with a rabbi from Washington where they read out the names of some of the victims and the hostages. Meanwhile, Vice President Harris actually delivered remarks at the Naval Observatory. That being said, Tuesday, President Biden campaigned for Bob Casey in Pennsylvania. Of course, Biden claims Pennsylvania as one of his home states and has a close relationship with Senator Casey. But where we've really seen Biden sort of reassert himself as the leader of the free world is dealing with hurricanes Helene and Milton. On Wednesday, the president had a number of public appearances where he not only questioned his cabinet and the FEMA administrator, Deanne Criswell, about the government's response. He delivered remarks where he called out former President Trump, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and other Republicans for spreading alleged misinformation about the hurricane response that they say could jeopardize lives. They're saying people aren't coming to receive federal aid from the government because they're worried their homes might be taken or their property seized. And the president really, again, continued on that on Thursday when he told President Trump, get a life, man, stop spreading disinformation. We're doing everything we can to help these victims right now.
So it's been an interesting dynamic because obviously the vice president replaced Biden at the top of the Democratic ticket, but Biden is still the president, and there have been times where it's a little awkward in terms of, who should be out front and should really be, the main person we're looking to. How have they kind of navigated that dynamic over this week?
It's certainly a juggling act, and I can't say that their strategy has been particularly effective, mostly because Vice President Harris has not been in Washington beyond the speech she gave on Monday on the October 7th anniversary. Of course, she has a campaign to run, and given all of these crises that we're dealing with right now, that means the president has to be in D.C. coordinating their responses. He was actually supposed to go overseas. He had a trip planned starting Thursday where he would visit Germany and Angola to make good on his promise to visit Africa before leaving office.
Right.
But again, the hurricane sort of threw that out of whack. Now, if you look at Harris's campaign, the way they've been running this, they're trying to say she's been fully in command with Biden throughout these last 4 years. She's just as important as the chief executive, but she's really nowhere to be found. So on the one hand, they are separating these two principles, but in reality, it just sort of goes to show how symbolic the office of the vice presidency is, because while President Biden is meeting with the FEMA director, speaking with Governor DeSantis, Vice President Harris is nowhere to be found.
And it's an interesting dynamic in that Harris is simultaneously trying to run as if, she as the vice president has a lot to do with the accomplishments of the Biden administration, but she also wants to be a completely different entity than the president.
It's a thin line she's been walking since July. Like you mentioned, she wants to take credit for their victories, but wants to have nothing to do with everything that basically chased Biden out of office outside of his age. We're talking about inflation. We're talking about the Afghanistan withdrawal. We're talking about his perhaps mishandling of the wars in Ukraine and the Israeli-Gaza conflict. So again, it's just too early. Well, I say too early. We only have a few weeks left in the election.
Right.
But to know whether or not this sort of hands-off and give me a hug approach will work for Vice President Harris. But I don't really expect that to change, again, in the final few weeks we have before November 5th.
Oh, it's a delicate dance for the next few weeks. Thank you, Christian. You can read Christian and the rest of our political team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.